Some of you will probably remember Deep Thoughts by Jack Handey. It was a recurring bit on Saturday Night Live where a funny quote masquerading as a profound life lesson would scroll down the screen. If you haven't heard of them, look them up, and you're welcome. One of those deep thoughts that frequently comes to my mind is this. To me, it's a good idea to always carry 2 sacks of something when you walk around. That way, if anybody says, "Hey, can you give me a hand?" you can say, "Sorry, got these sacks." I think of this often, not because I'm a jerk who doesn't like to help people, but because I frequently think about how we sometimes treat our kids like those sacks. We've got our hands full with these kids, and we use them as excuses of why we can't do things. Sorry, can't exercise, got these kids. Sorry, can't read a book, take a shower, eat sitting down, wash my face, got these kids. If we get stuck in this victim mentality, like we can't do things for ourselves because of the kids, those kids not only become the excuses, they become objects of resentment. Motherhood becomes an object of resentment. We decide that we can't have fun or do anything for ourselves anymore. We're moms now. I used to think like this sometimes. When somebody asked me to do something fun or even to exercise with them, my first instinct was to say, "No, I've got to take care of my kids." Then I met other moms who were totally doing all these things, even with a bunch of kids. They got creative and resourceful and worked together to figure out childcare. Most importantly, they prioritized some of their own needs. Remember, you can hand those cute little sacks over to somebody else to carry once in a while. This is the How She Moms podcast, where we talk about how different moms solve the same problems. I'm Whitney Archibald, a mother of 5 kids myself. I collect ideas so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. In the last episode, we talked about why self-care is important and about some great ideas of how to make it happen. In today's episode, we're going to talk to 3 moms who have figured out how to take care of themselves while taking care of their kids in 3 very different ways and in 3 different situations. Let's start with the self-care ninja, Casey Reed. I met Casey soon after we moved to Spokane, Washington, where we lived for 2 years before moving to Colorado. I don't know if I've ever met someone so full of energy and fun. Firecracker is putting it lightly. She came to mind right away when I thought of self-care because she was always doing interesting things. Starting businesses, flipping houses, working out, going on adventures. So I called her up and asked if she was still doing interesting things now that she's a mom.
I have kept all my hobbies. Actually, I've added to my hobbies.
Awesome.
It was not challenging for me to realize that I have to take care of myself first before I can take care of others. If I don't do those things that help me out, which I'm a very active person, so I exercise and I like to be involved. I have my hobbies. I need to spend time on those things so that I feel fulfilled. If I don't do that, then I get really grouchy and I'm not as enjoyable and I'm not as effective. So for me, I don't think I ever struggled with taking care of myself first. And I know some people might call it selfish because I use my friends as babysitters. I use daycares. I use the gym daycare. I use my resources so that I can have the time to take care of myself. And in the end, my time with my children is much more valuable and much more quality. And, sometimes I can't do something that I want. Right. That's part of being a mother. So you do have to sacrifice, but I do not sacrifice the things that are the most important to me.
What does that look like for you? What is kind of a self-care package?
Okay, there's 2 things that I have to have or else all other things crumble. I have to have exercise and I have to have sleep. Those are my 2. My husband realized it from the get-go. I didn't realize it. It's a lot harder to see the things that you need in yourself. So my husband is very observant, and he's very good about kind of cueing me in onto some of the things that I need. But when we were very first married, we moved across the country to Washington, D.C. I'd never lived in a city that big, and I was very homesick. And we'd only been married 2 weeks at this point. And it was very new. And he's like, "You need to go exercise." And so he got me into a gym, and it really helped my transition. So ever since then, he's helped me get to the gym, go running, whatever it is. But I need to move. I feel much better when I do. And then sleep. I have to sleep. So sometimes I will get confused at night usually when I'm tired, and I think that reading a book or watching a movie is what I want, when in reality I'm tired and I just want sleep. And so he helps me out with that too. And he'll say, you're tired. I don't think watching a movie or starting a brand new novel is a good idea. How about you go to sleep and then you can do it tomorrow? And I fight him, and I usually listen because he's always right. And I always feel better the next day. I'm so glad I went to bed early.
That is so remarkable, though, that he is so tuned into that and that you have kind of a partner in your self-care.
Oh, it helps. And I do it for him, too. I've noticed, or he's told me some of the things that he needs. So we work together as a team. And when we start seeing each other, maybe usually it's tiredness or, just the little signs that you're getting depleted. We'll pull each other aside and say, I think this is a good idea to help.
That's so cool because often, we do that with our kids just instinctively because they don't know what they want, obviously, and you have to look for cues of sleepiness and things like that. But I don't think we always think about taking that role for our spouses.
It's true. And, Jake and I are very respectful of each other. I think you just have to be respectful. Yeah. Just, this is your choice, but I highly, highly recommend you, going to the gym. I think Jake it was a couple nights ago. He got invited to a guy's game night, and he was tired, and he didn't want to go. And I said, you are going to have so much fun. And I really encouraged him, and he kind of fought me on it. But he went, and he came back so much lighter. I knew that would help him feel better. And when he got back, he's like, thank you for encouraging me to go. I actually really needed that. So we help each other out.
I love that. So one of those specifically is a very difficult thing to do, especially when your babies are young, the sleep part. How did you fulfill that sleep self-care at the times when your babies weren't sleeping?
Oh, it was so hard. I think I had to be okay with letting my children cry sometimes. And, if I took care of all of their needs, then I would put them to bed. And if they were still crying, then I used my husband again. He's such a support for me. But I used him and said, please tell me it is okay that they cry themselves to sleep right now. And he said, they're okay. I'm like, will you be there just in case? And he's like, yes, I'll be there. And then I had the freedom to go to sleep. But other things that I did is naps. I would nap throughout the day. I slept whenever I could, and yeah. I really just tried not to feel guilty. Like especially the first 6 months after a baby's born, my house looks terrible. And we eat out a lot, or my husband will order food in, and it's not great. Like, I have health goals, but those just kind of go out the window because priority number one is making sure I am getting enough sleep to manage. So he was just very supportive about, yeah, it's okay, your house is messy. Maybe I can step in and do the laundry. And he's actually taken the laundry over ever since then. And he just helps me out. And sometimes I'll even say, tell me that it's okay that the house is messy. And he'll say, it's okay that the house is messy. You're doing great. So I would ask for reassurance because one of my love languages is words of affirmation. So when I was feeling like maybe I wasn't doing good enough, I would just ask for, please give me feedback. And he would give me feedback, and it helps me feel better. So.
Oh, how I love Casey and Jake's self-care strategy, making it a partnership. I've seen this partnership in action, and Casey and Jake really do take good care of each other. Since we're talking about self-care, I thought I'd mention a little gift you could give yourself this holiday season, a subscription to the How She Moms Patreon community. If you've ever wished How She Moms was a weekly podcast instead of twice a month, you're in luck. On the weeks I don't publish a regular episode, I publish an episode of How She Moms Plus, which Patreon members receive right in their regular podcast feed. This is where I publish longer interviews of the moms you hear on How She Moms. My most recent episode is an interview with Brooke Romney, one of my favorite writers about motherhood and a mom that you've heard several times on How She Moms. In this episode of How She Moms Plus, we talked about different stages she's gone through as a mom, and most specifically, how much she's learned from other moms along the way. Here's a little teaser from that episode. When Brooke Romney was a young mom, she moved to a community in Arizona with many other young families. At first, she let herself get ensnared into the comparison trap, thinking she just couldn't measure up.
I saw women who did things a lot better than I did and who did a lot more than I did and who had more kids than I had. But what I realize now is they just had a lot more experience and knowledge. They were better at things than I was because they had experienced more things than I had experienced. And so I started off that stage in kind of a low spot. It was such an intense time of learning for me. I learned from moms who were stages ahead of me. I learned so much. I became someone that I never even expected that I could become. And it was all because of these women who taught me so much about motherhood and homemaking and also about self-care and self-development and finding talent.
To subscribe to How She Moms Plus and get access to lots of other great resources to help you with motherhood for just $5 a month, go to patreon.com/howshemoms or just click on the link from howshemoms.com. We'd love to have you join us, and thank you. The next mom I'm going to introduce you to is Brittany Smart. About 5 years ago, Brittany was struggling with motherhood. She had 5 small children, the oldest only 11.
Without sounding like overly dramatic and stuff, my status was a very disengaged, somewhat apathetic, isolated mom who did not want to be a mom, who wanted to just be left alone. That was pretty much my mental and emotional state at the time, which is unfortunate because my children were at ages and there were enough of them, even though if I had one, it would still be the same. But I couldn't afford to be that way for the welfare of my children and their outlook, their emotional states, their progression and development. I was very checked out of motherhood. I felt at the time quite helpless. In fact, I didn't necessarily even have the wherewithal to analyze what I was and where I was mentally and emotionally. I was just kind of surviving and doing everything I could to be away from my children. Oh, yeah. It makes me sad. It makes me sad. It's like almost like an out of body experience, kind of looking back at that woman, and it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, but this is so common. And of course, those feelings of wanting to escape from your children are followed by guilt, shame, and so much sadness. At this point, many moms would have decided it was time for a getaway, a break from the struggle. But while studying her scriptures one day, really looking for a big change, Brittany decided instead that she needed to stop trying to escape and instead to lean in and reconnect with her children. So she came up with a plan.
First of all, I realized that I wasn't showing love to my children at all. And in fact, I even had the self-awareness enough to recognize at this point, I didn't even like my children. And I didn't like them because I didn't know them. Like I had lost so much time of connecting with them and really being their mom that I didn't even know who they were at this point. And so I was thinking, okay, well, if I'm working backwards from wanting to love my children, it starts with getting to know them, and to get to know someone, you need to spend time with them. And so how was I going to go about spending time with my children? And I think a couple of key things were important, that it needed to be individual time, because I already was with my children. I'm a full-time mom, so there's a lot of FaceTime already, even though I'm disengaged. It's kind of but it wasn't quality time. It was just lots of time. And so I needed to spend individual time with them, and it needed to be focused on getting to know them. And it also needed to be consistent. And for me, sometimes I get overwhelmed with grandiose plans, and then they don't happen because they're too big for what I can do at that time. And so for this, I was in such a point of starting at kind of ground zero that I thought, I can guarantee I can commit to 5 minutes a day with each of my kids. That is a bite-sized chunk that I can do, and who knows if it will help. If it doesn't help, okay, but turns out, spoiler alert, it did help. It helped immensely. It changed my life and my parenting. but that was something that I could do, a manageable chunk that I could do and be consistent with for the 4 weeks that I committed.
So Brittany began a new bedtime ritual, which she calls a 5-minute time in. She committed to spending 5 minutes a day with each of her 3 oldest children, then ages 7, 9, and 11, for 4 weeks. Maybe it's strange to include a story like this one in a self-care episode. After all, Brittany was really focusing on her kids, not herself. But, as Brooke Romney said in the last episode, connecting with others can be a wonderful and essential component of self-care. Brittany had the self-awareness to know that this connection is just what she needed to bring back a sense of purpose and meaning to motherhood. She was taking care of herself and her children as she took the time to nurture their relationship. And it worked, even better than she thought it would. She wrote about the whole experiment in her book, The 5-Minute Time In, which you can and should buy on Amazon, and which I will be giving away next week as part of a week of Thanksgiving giveaways. In the book, she goes into detail about this experiment, even sharing some of the sweet conversations she had with her kids and the discoveries she made along the way about them and herself. Brittany is also a great writer, which makes this a really insightful read. I asked Brittany if she still does this daily time in with her kids.
So what that did for me was it got me back into probably like a level, I hate to use the word normal or average or something, but just like a basic level of connection of like a mom to her children. And I know everyone's unique and there is no such thing as maybe average or normal, but I'll just use that for lack of a better term. I don't do time in that formulaic and rather formal way anymore. But what that taught me was to carve out opportunities to connect with my kids. And that has been ongoing. Like I'll see one of them, just reading a book out in the living room and I'll go plop down next to them and just connect for a little bit. Whereas prior to this, I didn't necessarily make proactive steps to connect, and I learned that it doesn't take a vacation. It doesn't take an entire day. It doesn't take an hour even. It just takes daily touch points that are actually intentional, that are actually with a purpose of, hey, this is me looking at you and seeing you and talking with you. And so that has been a mainstay ever since. And it's been great. I feel like we have, we're highs and lows. My children and I don't like hold hands and skip around life together. That's weird and not normal, but we're connected and we trust each other.
I love that Brittany didn't just put a Band-Aid on the dissatisfaction and frustration she was having with motherhood. She got to the root of her problem and figured out what she really needed to make motherhood more meaningful and find more fulfillment in that role. It reminds me of a quote I love by Seth Godin, who said, "Instead of wondering when your next vacation is, maybe you should set up a life you don't need to escape from." We all have the power to examine our life and our needs and find daily ways to make our lives more fulfilling. Cut out some of the extra things that are getting in the way of joy and replace them with things that give you life. The last mom we're going to talk to today is Andrea Quimby. I talked to Andrea at a difficult stage in her life. Her husband had gotten a new job, so they moved from the East Coast to the West, and then her marriage ended unexpectedly shortly thereafter. If anyone needed self-care, she did. At the time I talked to her last winter, her daughter was just 16 months old.
The image I think you can have of someone that's going through all the different transitions I'm going through is like the fainting couch,
Right.
And the woman in her nightgown and she's got, one hand on her head and she's fainting, which I get, by the way. Like, I feel you, woman on the fainting couch. I get it. But that's not possible. That's not a mindset that I can afford to stay in. I have a very young child who picks up on, just like children do, they pick up on your stress and on, things that are going on with you. So, I'm looking for work. So all of these things, I can't afford to just fall apart.
Andrea knew she needed to come up with a self-care strategy to get through these challenges. She asked herself,
how do I even want to define what this even means to me? Because what it means to my best friend isn't necessarily what it's going to mean for me right now in this time of my life. So another way that I started to think about it was I kind of redefined it a little bit as setting myself up for success. It's kind of the way I think about it now. Like, what are the things that I need to make sure that I'm making the time for and putting in my day and prioritizing that are going to set me up for success. So what that really looks like right now is drilling down into the, I would say, spiritual, mental, emotional parts of self-care, and really making sure that I'm turning the volume up as far as I can on those areas, because I've realized that I need to be okay up in my head. You know, I need to be really clear-headed, and I need to be processing my emotions in a healthy way, and I need to be able to see what's really going on in my life in order to be a great mom, in order to have the energy to do everything that I need to do for her and for me.
Yeah.
So what that's meant is getting plugged into all kinds of social and support groups through church, and to be prioritizing appointments with a counselor every week, making sure that I'm seeing my friends who have been just so amazing and so supportive during this transitional time, so that I'm having time with them, and that fills me up as well.
I love the idea that setting yourself up for success is a form of self-care. I hadn't really thought of that. One of the ways Andrea does this is by scheduling in some downtime.
I really look at the whole week, and that's what the Lazy Genius podcast that helped me a lot with figuring this out, kind of looking at just weeks at a time and kind of sitting down, looking at the time that I have and figuring out how do I want to accomplish the things that I need to get done in the most, in like the best way. And how can I make sure I'm still putting space in my calendar? I noticed immediately that when I overschedule myself and I'm committing to just doing, I just get very overwhelmed. I start to kind of feel, I think, more anxiety. And so I realized I have to deliberately, when I'm looking at my week, put in just chunks that have nothing scheduled, so I can have that reflection time, or I can be spontaneous and do something. Another thing that I'm prioritizing for self-care that I can't tell, it's actually embarrassing, I can't tell you when the last time was that I prioritize this, is fun. And I went skiing for the first time in over 20 years this past weekend. It was something that I used to love doing. I grew up doing it as a child, and it was a spontaneous thing that friends invited me to do, and I was able to do it. And it brought me so much joy and just opened up this whole new, it was like living in a house and then finding out that you have a whole addition, that you know is there. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have a lot more fun right now. I'm going to prioritize just joy and fun, because I want my daughter to grow up seeing a mom who sees the value of those things in her own life.
Yeah. Not
just creating it for her, but in her own life. And this actually all comes from a woman that you may be familiar with named Julie Bogart, who's actually a homeschooling kind of CEO of a company for homeschooling. And she talks about a concept called awesome adulting, pretty much saying to live your life showing your children that being an adult is more than paying bills and tasks and drudgery, right? That you're also a person who has interests and passions and things you enjoy. And so that's what the kind of role model I'd like to be for my daughter is just, for her to see someone who has a rich life. So it's like, I got to start now.
Whoa. Awesome adulting. That is a beautiful concept right there, and it hit home. Not too long before my interview with Andrea, my 7-year-old daughter had asked me, "Mom, is being a mom fun? Because it looks like it's really hard. I don't know if I want to be a mom." I scooped her up and told her all the things I love about being a mom, and told her the choice was up to her, but that I did love being a mom, even when it wasn't fun. So when Andrea gave me this term, awesome adulting, I took up the challenge of being a good example to my kids of what it looks like to create a life you love. One simple change I made was playing the piano more when my kids were around to see me, and not letting them interrupt that time. This has the added benefit of showing them that playing the piano can be a pleasure, not just something they have to do before they can play. I also let them see me read, dance, hike, and do other things that bring me joy, and talk to them about how much I love doing these things. I also talk to them a lot about how much I love podcasting, and share with them when I'm excited about an interview or when I achieve a goal. I always make sure they see me trying new things. Whatever excites you and brings you joy, let your kids see you being an awesome adult. Like Brittany, figure out what you need to find fulfillment and purpose and make that part of your everyday routine. Create a life you love. Brainstorm with your spouse or a friend about how you can help each other make time for yourselves, your needs, and yes, even your wants. Self-care is not selfish. It's an act of love to yourself and even to those around you. Now go out and be the awesome adult that you are. Thank you for listening to the How She Moms podcast. If you like it, tell a friend. The bigger the community, the more ideas. There are lots of ways you can add your ideas to the How She Moms community. We have a Facebook group where we share ideas about upcoming topics and help each other solve problems we're facing in motherhood. You can also follow How She Moms on Instagram for quick tips and ideas. And you can go to howshemoms.com where you'll find transcripts of episodes and lots of other great resources. Special thanks to my mom, Susan Singley, for recording my theme music. She played this song all the time when I was growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.